Right, day 422. And we are still waiting for the tipping point. This show is titled, I Mask, Therefore I Am. And I could have never known the various messages that were tied to this title. So I need to explain to you that journey that I took here to the studio today and realizing the significance of the source of this play on words. So I'm going to start this show describing a dilemma that a specific philosopher of the 17th century had. His name was Rene Descartes. And perhaps some of you might have heard of Descartes. He was a tipping point, Descartes, because he was the last of the rationalists, those who believed at that time of perfection, of something that is not to be questioned, and that almost drove Descartes mad. He thought about his situation so much, striving towards perfection, that he got to the point of even questioning whether he actually existed. What was the proof? How could he know? And through that, he came up with his famous phrase, I think, therefore I am, which was kind of a workaround when you think about it. We know when we get older that we think things or we don't think things, and the relationship between what's going on in our head and what physically comes out is not necessarily one-to-one. But of course, looking at the time that Descartes made the statement, I could not have imagined how fitting it is to describe that time to the time that we have today. The idea of perfection, the questioning of science, the power and the fallibility of the empirical model. And I think that has everything to do with our show today. On a very simple level, of course, I don't need to describe to you the discussions that we're currently having today tied to the idea, should we wear a mask or shouldn't we? Very similar to, well, how's the weather going to be today? Can I wear shorts and maybe some sandals? I would argue that the mask is only the symptom, that the problems that are tied to this object are much more deep-seated. And to a certain degree, I think it depends on where you are. And where you are is not necessarily just physical, but a mental state as I mentioned, welcome to day 442. One thing's for sure, we wouldn't have had these discussions back in the middle of March of last year because they were not a topic. And I think it's important to go back to the beginning to understand what the real issue is. The mask only holds a representation. The real issues are all tied to trust, authority, and possibly abuse. So let's go back to that time. I know it seems like it's ages ago, but it was only 14 months ago, where nobody was talking about masks. We were all saying, oh, this will be over in a couple weeks' time, and everything will go back to normal. And of course, we can and should be able to forgive anyone who makes a mistake. But there are some that would argue that was not intended to be a mistake, but rather the path was intentional. But of course, if we are living in a society where we expect others to take care of us instead of us taking care of ourselves, and I'm not talking about each individual for herself, but rather that we as a community take care of ourselves, then we shouldn't be surprised if sometimes we end up being a little bit hoodwinked. And I leave it to you to make your own judgment. And in fact, that's a very important point too, that we should never forget that everybody has the right. But we all know that those 2 weeks had passed. And all of a sudden, people were saying, hey, this is actually a problem. So that was the beginning of the hoodwinking. And that, my friends, has nothing to do with empiricism. It has nothing to do with science. Might be a little bit closer to this idea of perfection, where we expect specific individuals, due to their title or their luck in life, or their ability to maneuver, or maybe a combination of all three, that they are in a position to have much more of an insight. And that is really where the problem began. You're back at Radio Tipping Point, and our subject today is I mask, therefore I am, and I would love to tell you a story. It's a story about Shorty and Mr. Mosquito Stone. Now, Shorty was a lucky guy because Shorty always seemed to end up at the right place in the right time and has the right thing to say. And in spite of everything, Shorty's always looking really good. But Shorty has a couple problems. You know what I was talking about earlier about trust and authority? Well, Shorty has a little bit of a complex. And because Shorty has this complex, he feels that he is a little bit immune to all of this. That Shorty thinks anything that Shorty says, well, people have to love him. So they're always going to think that Shorty's telling the truth. And of course, let's go back to the beginning. Descartes talked about the difference between perfection and getting to what we would think the truth to be at a certain period of time. And that's kind of Shorty's problem, because Shorty thinks that he is perfection. And tends to forget that we are going to get to the truth sometime. Might take us a while, but we'll get there. So one day, Shorty got caught with his pants short. And that veneer that Shorty had was all starting to fall apart. And then came Mr. Mosquito Stone. And Mr. Mosquito Stone didn't realize that we were all supposed to think that Shorty is perfect. So do you know what Mr. Mosquito Stone, good thing I don't have to say that 5 times, Mr. Mosquito Stone. Do you know what Mr. Mosquito Stone ended up doing? He said, Shorty ain't wearing any clothes. And the people around Shorty all of a sudden said, oh my gosh, what did Mr. Mosquito Stone just say? Did I get that right? Did Mr. Mosquito Stone say that Shorty's not wearing any clothes? And then, of course, you had all of the apparatchiks around Mr. Shorty who were saying, how can Mr. Mosquito Stone actually say that Shorty's not wearing any clothes? My gosh. That's sacrilegious. And for those of you who might be familiar with the story, you will have realized that we are at the beginning, certainly not the end. And I make no pronouncements because Shorty seems to be like a cat. Shorty has 9 lives. But what if we can wish a little bit here? This is free radio, by the way, so that is allowed. What if we were able to come up with a clone for Mr. Mosquito Stone? Maybe a couple of them. Then all of a sudden, Mr. Mosquito Stone's not standing there by himself, stating that Shorty's not wearing any clothes. And that, my friends, would truly be a tipping point. Welcome to Desperately Seeking Tipping Point. And our subject today is I mask, therefore I am. And before that short interlude, told you the story about Shorty and Mr. Mosquito Stone. I'm not going to get this one right. I got 57 minutes. And you can say that over the last week, maybe two, I don't know about you, but I've noticed that the mask is off on Shorty. Because now all of a sudden, Shorty's starting to play some games, some serious games. And one of the games that he is playing, we know quite well in this society. And it's all tied to showing sympathy towards the victim. And there are probably a number of reasons why that game is so popular. And I bet you can probably think of a few yourself, but these are the ones that immediately come to mind. First one would be, if somebody's a victim, then we must be doing better than them. And we have this natural tendency to go ahead and save the day for those victims. And of course, this is not, I repeat, not a unique pastime. We've been watching this game for a number of years in the United States, starting, I'm thinking about one particular individual who came out in 2015, said, yeah, but it's the Mexicans. And then it was always somebody else. And let's stay with this scenario because there's something quite interesting, a parallel. So I wonder if Shorty's saying that not just he is a victim, but he's actually making a call to all of those others that feel that they are victims. And so that bon ami is all tied to victimhood. But of course, we all know if there's a victim, then we have to have a perpetrator, don't we? And that story we know very well. Whether they are truly perpetrators or not, it's immaterial, isn't it? Because like I said, Shorty is a storyteller. And he is a good storyteller, I have to admit. He is a good storyteller. I might not like his stories, but he's a good storyteller. And so, we're expecting somebody to come in to save Shorty. Because if they save Shorty, then there's hope for all of us victims out there, right? So then I ask you, and this is all tied to the subject, folks. This is all tied to the subject. What about those of us who don't feel like victims? Where do we fit into this picture? And I would argue, yes, we are part of this narrative. Oh, that's right. We are not victims because we were born on the right side of the tracks. We are not victims because we had both a mommy and a daddy. We are not victims because we never had to worry about where we were going to get our next meal. And we are not victims because, of course, we were born with the right skin color, right? That's right, folks. It has nothing to do with a mask. It has everything to do with various elements that I have tried to obliquely depict. So, okay, great. We know that the masks are just a demonstration of something that's much more deep-seated. So then I ask you, how do we proceed? And Mr. Mosquito Stone. So what happens to us? The simple people in society, that when we start saying that Shorty ain't got no clothes on, what happens to us? Well, it kind of all depends on whether you are on Shorty's good list or on Shorty's bad list. Because Shorty doesn't mind if you're a little bit of a recalcitrant. He kind of likes that maverick sort of thing. Because Shorty is actually a closet cowboy. So if you can go ahead and show that you're a little bit of a maverick, and you can appeal to that cowboy side of Shorty, well then you're going to do okay. Then you can go ahead and say whatever you like, because Shorty's not going to look at that as being a threat. That's something he can go ahead and say, hey, look, I'm tolerating this maverick, so put those thoughts about authoritarianism away. But of course, we know that this is part of the plan. This is part of Shorty's plan. Yep, that's what it is. Because, and we have the proof. And Shorty, of course, is not the only one whose mask is coming down. Even if they are not directly protecting Shorty, they have something at stake. So if we are part of Shorty's hit list, and we were to go ahead and say, well, Shorty ain't wearing no clothes, and so you can't look quick enough. And all of a sudden, we have some very nasty titles put on top of our heads. And all we're doing is saying, Shorty ain't got no clothes on. Yeah, so where does that leave us? I do believe we have some inspiration here in our society. All is clearly not lost. In fact, I would argue we're just getting started. And this shock and awe of March of last year has clearly worn off. But that does not mean that we're getting any closer to thinking there is no ultimate truth. But there are some things we could use as a basis. There is one organization who kind of got caught up in this shock and awe last year. But they've been girding their loins and garnering their strength. And I see that they are ready to make a comeback. And yes, they are the group that have one of our favorite days of the week within their title. And they are, in comparison to a number who claim to be unbiased, who claim to be uncorrupted, who claim to speak the truth. This one, I think, really is speaking the truth. And this group, and I think you already know who I'm talking about, Friday's Future. They seem to be one of the few groups in this country who are willing to say that Shorty and a lot of other people aren't wearing any clothes. And of course, it's not just Shorty. Shorty's representing a whole group. And of course, all of these groups that would like you to think that they are noble. That they are fighting for the truth. That they are the one and only. They are all in a big tussling match. And it's interesting to watch, especially if you're not part of the tussling and you can watch from a distance. It's quite amusing on the one side. It's extremely disparaging from the other. Because they would all love for these Friday future people to be their friends. Because they do not believe in the necessity of the mask. And so you'll have these groups all fighting, trying to get a little bit closer, thinking that these Fridays future people have pixie dust. And if I can have a little bit of that pixie dust rub off on me, then I will be new and improved. And that pixie dust is a good camouflage for the mask. And of course, I've been talking a lot about Shorty, and Shorty is not alone. Shorty has a lot of cousins all over the place. And one thing's for sure, we do have individuals who believe and we have parties that support it, not just here. They claim it's all about freedom of expression. And these are usually coming from the victimhood group. But we don't realize. Yes, freedom's important. It's very important, in fact. But with freedom, there is a certain responsibility that you have to be mature enough to manage. So, maybe if I can add this to the wish list. Let's drop the victimhood. Questioning authority is a good thing. And that empowerment that we should all be striving for means that we have the freedom to make choices. And this is the part that's very often missed in these discussions. And we hold the responsibility, the accountability for those decisions that we make. And yes, we do have the ability, if we allow ourselves to. So I think that would be the message that I would like to leave this show with, the message to all of you that I wish that is something that you all feel is worth striving towards. So I hope you like the story of Shorty and Mr. Mosquito Stone. And we will be back next week with another rendition of Radio Tipping Point. Thanks for listening.